trying to hide this so you can't really see it, but I think you can kind of see it, right? Hi friends, Tracy here from the Sewing Channel. In today's video, I'll take 12 fat quarters, 12 Christmas fat quarters. I'm gonna chop them up. And I'm not even gonna measure, nope. Then I'm gonna take the final quilt top, which is gonna be way too small for anyone. And I'm going to extend it this way and this way. You don't want to miss a minute of today's tutorial. Enough talking already. Let's get busy chopping up some fat quarters and extending our quilt top. Oh, I almost forgot. I have a surprise binding that I'm going to show you at the end of this video. Okay, on with the tutorial. I've grabbed 12 Christmas fat quarters. I'm going to just chop these up and then sew them back together in just any random order. The only rule that I'm going to give myself is it has to have a straight squared edge on each of the pieces. I'm not doing any wonky blocks at all. So we'll just see what we come up with. The first thing I did was pick out 12 fat quarters that, were similar in color. I'm going to take 3 at a time and line them up on the selvage and then trim 3 at a time. I'm going to take 2 dark colors and 1 light color. Take your big ruler. I love this big ruler. It works out so well. So here I'm going to line that selvage edge the best I can up on one of the lines on my mat. And you can see how wonky these are. Wow, they're so wonky, but it is what it is. That's the way they come off. And then I'm going to slice right along that top selvage mark that I know is semi-straight. First thing I'm going to do is square this up. I'm going to find that best edge, that shortest edge there, and that's what I'm going to cut up to. Once I know that this is straight and this is straight, then I can go in here. I'm not going to look down here though because this one isn't cut yet. Kind of peel back a couple too just to see where you're at, to see how far, if one is way shorter than the other. Slice. And instead of moving this, I'm going to move myself over here. And you can see there's a big difference. That one is way shorter, but we're just going to keep it together here and just cut them together. I'm using a line on my mat, connecting it with a line on my ruler. Now I figure out what size I want these 3 to be. They can be any size you want because they're all going to be different, and we're just going to connect the best we can. So I think I'm going to do a long strip here first. Line everything up. I'm using my ruler now because I know that everything is squared up. You might want to grab a couple different rulers. I'm going to start over here. Okay, so there's 5 inches. 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 and a quarter. And then whatever this one ends up being, which looks like it's about 6 by 5. This one I'll just cut whatever. I'm not even going to tell you the measurements because I feel like that takes away from the creativity of the whole project. So I don't know, maybe I will. I feel like maybe I want a long strip. So that's what I'm going to cut out of this. This one I am going to go 3 inches and then the length. So here are all these pieces, all those scraps. So this is going to give us a ton of scraps. We're going to be busy. We are. Or rather, I'm going to be busy. Let me finish up randomly cutting all these. Now this one, my fat quarter ends up being extra long. But if I were to cut it in half and attach it over here, it would be a total fat quarter. So I'm using this up, and I will just cut this one separately. Let me cut up the rest of my fat quarter scraps, and then I'll show you how I'm going to put them together. So here are all my chopped up fat quarters in random sizes. I have no clue what the sizes are. They're just all different square angled lengths and widths. So here I've taken a light and a darker fabric and sewn them together, and you can see one is longer than the other, and that's okay because we will cut that off and we'll use it somewhere else in the quilt. So here I'm just going to press this out. And I will trim this right away before I go any farther. So here's my first two pieces. Now let's continue on, and we will go in the log cabin effect. And I think I want something light right here. This one will fit, but let me see if I can find a smaller size. Here we go. That one fits perfectly. So here I'm just going to add that onto here. Come up here and finger press over, and then press. Here you can see some cute little cars on there, right? Those are cute. And then we're going to trim this up. I always trim right away because that's how things get really, really wonky. So there's that little block. I'm going to add something else here along this edge. Which one should it be? I may come across where I want this one on here, maybe that way, and I need to fill that other spot up there. And so maybe I'll grab one of these and see. Yeah, that would work. So what I'm going to do is add these two together, and then I'm going to attach it to this piece. Anything goes in scrap quilting. I'm going to position it in a way that, since this one is sort of dark red and that one is too, so that this lighter one is more touching this one. So far so good. Let's add a strip over here. I think we need to incorporate some of this green in here, right? Some turquoise. Well, we found this one here, so I can probably add that there, and let's see if we can't add another little piece. Maybe one of these. Yeah, I like that. Hopefully you can see that there. So I will add these two pieces together and then add this to that. Or maybe that like that. Which looks better? I think I'm going to put it like this. I think I like that better. Okay, flip that over. And look, it's a perfect length fit. Here we have this piece right here, all done. And let's see what the size of this is. We're looking at about 11 by about 11. So I'm going to stop at this, and I'm going to make a bunch more in this size, and then I'll try piecing it all together. So let me get some more done up like this, and then I'll show you my progress. So this is what I have so far. Yeah, it looks chopped up. I just find it really soothing and relaxing to just put a bunch of squares together, just like a puzzle. So I've made, what, 6 blocks so far, and I can make a ton more, and I'm just going to keep going to see how many I can absolutely get with these 12 fat quarters. All I'm doing is taking like a middle square of focal fabric here, say, and then adding a piece of fabric to it, and then adding here, and then adding and adding, like that log cabin scrappy look effect. I love that look. I think that it just looks so scrappy that it just looks good. I don't know. So here I'm going to use this one as my focal because it says gather, North Pole, ho ho ho, reindeer, holly, and just some cute little festive words on it. So I'll take and add those right sides together. And honestly, I'm not having a hard time at all finding fabrics in length to fit what I put together. So that's working out pretty good. So here you can see a little tiny bit left to cut off on that one. So I'll just flip that, line things up. And the other side looks pretty good. Now see, with something like this, that totally fits, but I will have to cut off some of the red, and that's okay. Doesn't bother me. I'm trying not to put 2 lights and 2 darks next to each other, but if I come across that, then I do. No big deal. So let's see about putting something right here. Oh, I think that looks nice right there. I like that. And all these over here are pieces that I chopped off the end that it didn't match up, and I can add these to different pieces, just like I did right here when I added these two together to connect that, which makes things really in anything goes. Scrappy quilt. I'll consider this one pretty much done. We will set that right there. So I'm going to continue on, and I'll meet you back here in a little bit. And we'll just keep on chopping and scrapping. I am so thankful for all of my brand new supporters of the sewing channel. Carolyn S., Cora, Jane, and Karen R. all bought me coffees this past couple weeks. I am loving the support. Thank you so much. And Connie and Chris, thank you so much for those super thanks. I appreciate all of your support. All of the support that I receive through coffee donations and through super thanks always goes right back in to the sewing channel, so that you can be assured that I'll keep creating more and more videos just for you. So here's my progress so far. I have used all of my fabric except for these few that are right here. I'm going to use all of these right here for fillers if I need to up here to make sure that everything is nicely connected. The first thing I'm going to do is connect all of these blocks up here together, making one big row, and then a middle row, and then a bottom row. And then I have a special cut that I'm going to show you that I'm going to do, or a special chop, if you will. Here I just wanted to show you my progress before I absolutely put it all together. I have row 1, 2, and 3. And by my calculations, I think it's going to end up about 55 by 55 square. And that's using almost all of those fat quarters. There's only just a few scraps left. I did use some fillers down here. You can see And where else, I think somewhere along here and in here I used some fillers. So I did use some of them to fill in any gaps that I had. But I just wanted you to see what that looked like before I did sew it all together into one big quilt top. I'm going to show you how to cut up the quilt top in order to get the racer stripes perfect. The first cut that I make is in the top and in the bottom. I determined how much I was going to cut my strips on how much larger I wanted the quilt to end up being. On the big quilt top, I figured 6.5 inches on the first cut in width. So your white strip then is going to be the same amount in width as this one, which is 6.5 inches for the big quilt top. And then we have the 6.5 inch cut down here. So right next to that is going to be the same in width, 6.5 inch cut right there. The next cut is going to be this cut right here. There was no rhyme or reason on the beginning widths, how far apart these were. I just knew that I wanted this second cut to be smaller than this one. On the big quilt top, this one ended up being 4.5 inch cut, which meant this one down here was also 4.5 inch cut. Then I cut out 4.5 inches in my white strip. I cut 2 of those. Now I know this isn't to scale, but you can kind of get an idea of how I'm cutting that big quilt top. The first thing I'm going to sew these 2 together, then this together, then these, these 2, these 2, these 2, and these 2. And then you go in and make that next cut, and I'll show you that here in a second. For the side white pieces, I ended up going with the same width that I made this first cut, which was 6.5 inches. So I'm going to cut off exactly the amount that I made these 2 cuts right here. And I'm going to do the same thing on this side. That same width, I also made the same on the side white piece. Now what you'll do is sew these 2 together, these 2, and these 2. The biggest thing you want to watch here is to make sure that when you go to sew either one of these pieces on, that you do have this lined up best that you can so that it gives that illusion that it is one stripe going through that big stripe down the side. A lot of quilters will press to the dark side normally, but for this one, I'm going to put it over to the white side only because there's going to be a lot of seams over there, and it's best to just, you know, push that seam allowance to where it wants to go. So when you go to line up your sides, you're going to want to make sure that everything is lined up best that it can be. You may want to look at it from the back and use your guide here. Now I'm going to pop some pins in because I don't want to mess this up, even though it is a mock-up. Probably lift it from this side would be better, huh? You can see better from this side. I mean, you may not be able to get it perfect, but is anything really perfect? So you can see there that that's probably the best I'm going to get there. So I'm just going to fold this back over and then sew 1/4 inch all the way down. So that's not looking too bad right there. Next, I'm going to go ahead and sew this big white strip on. Notice too that I'm pressing after each addition of strip. That just helps keep things nice and straight. It's also best too if you put it on the side, the cut side where you cut this from. I had that backwards a second ago. I hope I did that one on here. I don't know. Can't remember. Okay, go ahead and sew a 1/4 inch. So hopefully I can get it just as straight on my real quilt top. Looks like I did pretty good on the mock-up, so fingers crossed on this one. Now this mock-up, it has a smaller center in it, but in my big quilt top, I'm going to have a much larger center, giving those racer stripes all the glory on this quilt. Tell me in the comments what you think of this racer stripe method on extending your quilt width and your quilt length. Let me know, I'd love to hear. I'd also like to know, how do you make an extension on your quilts in width and length? I'd love to know that as well. I just wanted to show you what it looked like when 2 stripes were connected on the big quilt. Next, I have to cut the 2 top ones and sew those in, and then we'll go ahead and cut the sides. Don't be scared. It's okay to cut. Everything is looking really good here. The next step is to make sure that this cut is totally even on the sides, because I need to measure 6.5 inches in, and it has to be pretty precise. So if these jagged edges were left on there, it might mess me up. So we're going to cut those straight, and then we're going to come in at 6.5 inches and then sew that white strip right in there. When you are trying to get a straight cut on the sides of your quilt, when you have a ton of different scrappy blocks and such, you need to take note of what the shortest piece inward is. So you don't want to cut, say, this piece and follow that, because then you're going to be left with, you know, not enough here. So I looked at the side of this quilt, and it looks to be that if I line this up, that this is going to be the shortest piece along the side here. So I'm going to want to follow this guide right here. I'm going to line it up the best I can here, and then I'm also going to look within here and within the quilt top itself to see if I can find some straight edges so that we can get as precise as we possibly can. So if I line up here, I can see that that is totally off. Can you see that right there? Up here I have like not enough to fill that. So I'm going to have to back this up. Looking here first along that white edge and along the white edge here, and then again up here along this strip and the edge of that white strip. That's going to give me my best cut, I think. So I'm going to try and find this right here, that red piece. I'm going to line up there because that looks really good to me. And then I know that this is off here, but I think that's because that's the way I sewed it. I have a straight line here and in other places, so I'm going to go ahead and make this cut. And there we go. That's how I line up that side edge. And then I'm going to go in and take 6.5 inches off now. Before I go ahead and cut the 6.5 inches off though, I am going to put a stay stitch all along this edge here. That will ensure that none of these seams come apart. I'm still going to line up in here too because I don't want to mess this cut up. I want it to be as straight, you know, as it possibly can be. Again, line everything up and go 6.5. So you'll want to cut the other side too at 6.5 inches. But I'm going to do them one at a time just so that I don't get these pieces mixed up, because I do want them to have the matching spot on the opposite part of that white piece. Okay friends, here's my quilt top all done and I am loving it. I took this quilt top from 53 inches by 57 inches all the way to 63 inches by 74 inches. There's no doubt that I'll be able to get in this quilt and snuggle and cuddle and cover every part of my body. Nothing worse than trying to cuddle up with a nice quilt and your toes are hanging out. Am I right? I could take this one step farther and I can put a white border around the entire quilt if I wanted to make it even yet bigger. But I like this right here. I love the look of the racer stripes going across the top and the bottom and the ones down the side. So I'm going to leave it as is, and maybe on another quilt in a different video I will add a border around this design. But for now, it's time to get this quilt sandwiched up and do some free motion quilting. I basted my quilt top with wool batting and a flannel back. Yes, I'm using wool batting again in my quilt. I have to tell you, or I have to confess, I am loving wool batting in my quilt. Huge shout out thank you to Di from Sister Chicks Quilting for turning me on to wool batting. Now I use a ton of minky on the back of a lot of my quilts, and I cut along the sides when I'm trimming, and I'm left with all these strips of minky. This one right here happens to be off of my very first puff quilt. This minky is sort of special because it has an embossing on it, making a design with different divots in it, which gives it a very unique binding look at the very end. So I took my leftover minky scraps and cut them into 2-inch strips and connected them like normal. Then I attached them a little more than 1/4 inch onto my quilt top front. It's important to note here, however far you are sewing from the edge of your quilt to attach that binding, that's the same amount that you want to stop before that corner, before you sew off of that diagonal edge of the corner like I'm about to do here next. So as an example, if you're sewing a 1/2 inch in from the edge of your quilt, attaching that binding, then you want to stop a 1/2 inch before that corner and then sew diagonally off and then continue on like normal. So I'm attaching it just like I normally would if I was using a traditional binding. I'm pulling it straight across right there after I've made that diagonal seam, and then I fold it back, making a nice square edge there on the corner, and then I just slip it back underneath my needle and then continue sewing the same amount that I had been sewing. Like I said, mine was a little bit over 1/4 inch. So I'm going to pull it out here in a second, and I'm going to show you what it looks like on the corner before I actually finish the whole thing. You can see there it gives a nice chunky corner, a nice chunky binding overall. I really am surprised that it turned out so good. I think it was because the binding, or rather the minky itself, was textured. I really like that look. Now, if you don't like that line that you see on the front of the quilt top because of the way that you've sewn it, then go ahead and attach that minky to the back first and then wrap it to the front, and then the line will be on the back. It's all preference. It doesn't really bother me either way, as long as the overall look is there. I did take my small curved scissors and trim along the back of the Minky. Now remember, Minky doesn't fray in the end, so it's okay to leave the raw edge there. Check out Christmas 2023 Fat Quarter Chop. I am loving it. The binding worked out perfectly. I just love this Minky bind. And the texture, oh yeah, it totally makes the binding on this quilt. I have so many more fun quilting projects to make for Christmas. You don't want to be left behind come December. I'm sharing with you a picture of my fabric Christmas trees. Now I have a free pattern on my channel. It's on the tutorial itself, the links and all that. I'll provide the link here to those Christmas trees. You definitely want to make those. They are super cute. I have like 3 sizes and they are super easy to make and fill. Perfect for people who don't really want to decorate all that much but still want to be festive, like in nursing homes or older folks and such like that. Let me know in the comments what you all think of my Fat Quarter Chop quilt. Until next time on the Sewing Channel, Merry Christmas and take care.